I see Commissioner Tarnay, Miller, and Freeman and myself. So with that, we'll call to order the February 16th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. If you would like to submit public comment, please call or text 530-428-6555. Your comments will be read or played during the agenda item. Carissa, can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Gove.
Here.
Vice Chair Tarnay.
Here.
It's noted that Commissioner Hull is absent. Commissioner Freeman. I see you, but I don't hear you. Commissioner Freeman?
Here.
Heard that. Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. And moving on to due to the virtual nature of this meeting, we will forego the Pledge of Allegiance. And we'll move into agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is an opportunity for public comment. This public comment is for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Carissa, do we have any public comment?
I do not have any public comment for item 4.
Okay, hearing none, we'll close public comment. And I'd like to move into item 5.1, approval of the January 19, 2021 meeting minutes. And I should say that I actually have a correction that I'd like to point out. On page 29, my second comment was recorded incorrectly. I said, it's written down as, thank you for that clarification. It's important to point out that the town and the applicants are in an adversarial position. We're just trying to clarify things a little bit more. My comment was, it's important to point out that the town and the applicants aren't in an adversarial position. We're just trying to clarify things a little bit more. So I'd like the minutes to be amended.
Understood. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comment about the meeting minutes for the January 2021 meeting? I'll move to approve the amended meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Dan, do you approve? Okay, motion carries.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6, public hearings, minor review. We have none. Item 7, public hearings, major review. Item 7.1, agenda item is for 7.1 is for Soaring Ranch Phase 2, application number 2019-178. For those of you joining us at home, if you would like to submit public comment for this agenda item, please call or text 530-428-6555 now. Do I hear any commissioner recusals or disclosures?
I have spoken with people. Some folks called me and asked for clarifications. Sarah Green. I actually spoke with a lot of people about this project, including former town mayor Morgan Goodwin. I talked to our housing advocate for the town. So just a general, I talked to a lot of people about this.
And I should add that I spoke with Commissioner Tarnay, with Alexis O'Hare from MAP, with the government affairs person for the Contractors Association, and David Diamond from the Airport Board.
Commissioner Freeman?
Chair Gov, you and I briefly spoke about this, and that's about the extent of it for me.
Okay, and I'll second that. You and I did speak about it, and that's the only person I've discussed it with. Okay, moving on from recusals and disclosures, we'll move into staff presentations and give the floor to Laura.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. All right, so 7.1 on the agenda tonight is Soaring Ranch Phase 2. Just as a reminder, this project is requesting entitlements for a mixed-use project with 4 buildings. It has 31,523 square feet of commercial floor area and 69 rental multifamily residential units. 61 of those are market rate units and 8 are deed-restricted affordable housing units. There's the location of the Soaring Ranch project. And the entitlements that are requested are a development permit amendment, plan development amendment, tentative map amendment, and a use permit. And the applicant is also requesting approval of a 26% density bonus, which would increase the allowed number of residential units from 55 to 69. And they are also asking for concessions through the density bonus for parking and trail infrastructure modifications. These were some of the major discussion topics that we had at the January hearing, so I just wanted to include those. We can refer back to these as we go. The first was whether the project is consistent with the goals and objectives of the specific plan, whether the proposed mix of uses is appropriate for the regional commercial zoning district, and that compatibility issues have been addressed, whether the proposed amendments to the previously approved plan development create a superior project in terms of site design, and whether there are any modifications to the site design or building architecture that the Commission feels would be needed to achieve consistency with the specific plan standards and guidelines. Since the January hearing, which the Commission continued to allow the applicant team time to incorporate some additional details into the final project, the applicant team has made a few changes to the project. The first was moving buildings D and F 5 feet further from Soaring Way. And the purpose of that was to create a more pedestrian-friendly, usable, and active streetscape that allowed a larger patio area, additional landscaping. The next was incorporating the bike storage, bike parking, and bike maintenance stations into the site plan and landscape plan. They also included a new condition of approval related to those items. More detail was added to the plan for the outdoor spaces in Main Plaza. Landscape planters throughout the parking areas were moved and enlarged to save more of the existing trees. 5 were originally proposed to be saved. At the last hearing, 11 were proposed to be saved, and now there are 18 that are proposed to be retained. 12 of those are 24 inches and larger, including the 54-inch pine in the Main Plaza. The applicant team also added 2 more 3-bedroom units for a total of 5. This is the breakdown of the different unit types. And then the applicant team also provided the range of sizes for the different units, which is in the table below. They also provided some clarifications, one of which was that building rooftops would be designed to accommodate solar, and the panels would be provided in accordance with the California Building Code requirements. Each building has an elevator and meets all of the ADA requirements. The non-residential tenant space can be divided into smaller spaces within each building. There is 1,100 square feet of Class 1 trail that would be constructed as part of Phase 2. That would provide the connection to downtown along Brockway Road. Outdoor improvements include recreation areas for adults as well as children, and those would be open to all visitors, not just residents. And then the children's play and experience areas throughout the community plaza and park have natural features. The applicant team provided some proposed conditions of approval. The first was related to the bicycle parking and storage, and that was incorporated into condition 87. And staff also added language requiring the final bike parking locations to be identified prior to building permit issuance. The next was related to the bike maintenance stations. That was added as a new condition, 108. The next was related to the common open space areas. That language was added as condition 109. Each of the project's 4 mixed-use buildings will include the accessible elevator access. That was added as condition 110. And then there are some conditions that were added to condition of approval 85. Those were that the project's 4 mixed-use buildings would each include 2 deed-restricted affordable units, that the 8 deed-restricted units would consist of 2 studio, 3 one-bedroom, and 3 two-bedroom units, that each of the project's 2 and 3 bedroom units would include a bathtub, that lease agreements for the 69 rental units would include a minimum rental term of no less than 6 months, and that the lease agreements for the 69 units would prohibit subleases for a term less than 31 days. In addition to those conditions that were proposed by the applicant team, staff has a few proposed changes. One was adding the square footages for each type of residential unit to condition 85. The next was a question that came up at the last hearing from Commissioner Tarnay about the water meters for the units. The TDPUD confirmed that it could either be individual meters or sub-meters, so we're proposing to clarify that language. And then in condition 82, which was related to the preparation of an economic analysis, after further discussions with Commissioner Miller today, we realized that there could be a need to clarify the language based on what's in the policy in the specific plan. So the previous condition talked about national chains, which is not actually in the policy language. It was specifically not included. So the policy talks about retail tenants, and they would require the economic analysis if they have a gross floor area of 15,000 square feet or more. So we're proposing to amend that condition language to reflect what's in the actual policy. In addition to the project update since the last hearing, the Town Council also talked at their February 9th hearing about potential amendments to the specific plan. So those don't directly relate to this project, but I just wanted to let the Commission know that the Council directed us to begin working on some amendments to the specific plan, primarily to address the housing questions first, and then a second phase of updates would either be done as part of the 2040 general plan or as a separate process to look at the bigger picture questions. So we'll be bringing the amendments to the Commission for review in the near future to talk about the housing questions. And at that hearing, the Commission would forward a recommendation to the Council on whether to approve or deny those amendments. So the current project, this is the site plan showing the buildings moved slightly further from the street and those other changes that I mentioned earlier. These are some additional graphics that the applicant team put together to show the site design and the landscaping. And I think Rob and Laura Mello are going to probably talk in more detail about these as part of their presentation. These are some new renderings that the team put together, and also showing the plaza areas. And these were discussion topics from the last hearing about the targeted uses, site design and architecture, the density bonus requests, and the affordable housing plan. And we're proposing the same CEQA exemptions as the last hearing, so we can refer back to this if we need to. We received 5 public comments in writing prior to the hearing from Kathy Eccles, Sarah Green, Ruth Hall, Mike Wolf, and Mountain Area Preservation. So I won't read through all of these, but we can touch back on these if we need to. And all of the written public comments have been forwarded to the Commission for review prior to the hearing. Our recommendation tonight is the same recommendation as the last hearing, which would be to adopt Resolution 2020-24, determining the project to be consistent with the specific plan and precluding any further environmental review, and approving the development permit amendment, plan development amendment, tentative map amendment, and use permit based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. The commission could take alternate actions this evening. You could choose to continue the hearing to a date and time certain. You could add, delete, or modify the proposed conditions of approval, approve the project as is, deny the project on the basis that you can't make the findings, or require additional environmental review. So if you take action on the project tonight, the appeal period would end at 5 p.m. on February 26th. And I'm happy to take any questions. Rob Wood is also here to start off the applicant presentation when you're ready for him.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, Rob, why don't we go ahead and move into that applicant presentation? Rob, you're muted.
Okay, now I just got to figure out how to share my screen to get the PowerPoint up. Bear with me here for a second.
Take your time, Rob.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. See here. Nope. Slideshow. There we go. Okay, here we go. Thank you. Bear with me tonight too, because I'm trying to overcome a cough, and I may have to cough a few times during this presentation. But at the last hearing, there were several questions related to the project, as well as related to the specific plan and to the RM20 zone. So our goal tonight with this presentation is to address those questions and provide some clarification. So I want to start off with talking about the RM20 zone in the specific plan. Chapter 4 of the specific plan outlines the land use standards and the guidelines for each zoning district. So I want to read a couple sentences out of the chapter that's related to the RM20 zone that are highlighted here. Multifamily units constructed within the specific plan area outside of the RM20 zone shall be subject to development code requirements, except that all residential projects within the specific plan area are excluded from providing inclusionary housing and therefore do not need to comply with the development code chapter 18.214. Later in that chapter, it goes on to say, as an incentive for one developer to construct a single housing project on the RM20 zone parcel, future development on the RM20 site will not be required to provide inclusionary housing, and deed restrictions will not be required. Basically, that gives an overview of what the RM20 required. The intention of the RM20 zone was to incentivize development of the rest of the specific plan by taking care of the residential housing requirement. And that's why it has its own unique definition, which is different than the workforce housing that's defined in the development code. The bottom line is that, and kind of to summarize, is the RM20 zone is 100% market rate housing. There is no inclusionary housing required. There's no workforce housing required, or no deed restrictions required. And any residential project outside of the RMW20 zone is also excluded from inclusionary housing and workforce housing. That gives a good overview of what the specific plan requires for the workforce housing in the RMW20. So this is a chart that compares what the RM20 zone provisions are compared to what Soaring Ranch Phase 2 is proposing. The RM20, again, it's market rate housing, but it was restricted to minimum size of 400 square feet and a maximum size of 1,000 square feet. The reason for the market rate units it was to incentivize a developer to come in and build them. And it was kind of a affordable by design, so to speak. So what we're doing with Soaring Ranch is we're providing 69 units from studios to 3 bedrooms, and the sizes are just over 400 square feet to just over 1,200 square feet. Again, no inclusionary housing required in the RM20 zone. We are providing 8 inclusionary housing units that will be restricted to low-income residents, and no deed restrictions are required in the RM20 zone. They're not required for our project either, but JMA is committed to the things that are typically required in the workforce housing, like local employee preference, no short-term rentals, the 6-month minimum lease term, and annual monitoring. Those are typically required in workforce housing, and JMA is committed to doing those things. Some of those have been put into the voluntary conditions of approval. So this is a chart that shows how the workforce housing in the development code compares to the Soaring Ranch project. Again, the local employee preference, the short-term rental prohibition, 6-month initial lease, and annual monitoring. We're doing all those things. And then the minimum size typically in workforce housing per the development code is 50% 2-bedroom or larger. We're providing about 59% 2-bedroom and larger. So as staff indicated, there were several questions and comments from the Planning Commission at the last hearing, and we want to address those tonight in our presentations just to clarify things. So what I'd like to do is introduce Laura Mello. She'll start off and give an overview of the project, many of the project components and the outdoor spaces and the main plaza. So go ahead and take it away, Laura.
Thanks, Rob. I'm going to count on you to keep going with the slideshow. As you can see, we've updated our site plan a bit and wanted to discuss some of the comments that came out of the January 19th meeting. One was bike parking and storage. We have provided bike parking and storage around all 4 buildings. I will be showing a slide later that indicates the numbers. But as you can see on the site plan, they are located within 50 feet of every entrance. There are lockers and racks. Then we also enhanced the outdoor space per the comments, and that included having a children's nature play park, which uses natural features like large stumps carved into tunnels and climbing structures, stump jumping and all that. Also some boulder scrambling throughout the park. And then a large lawn area that could be multi-purpose. These, the open space, the plaza and the parks are open to everyone, the residents and visitors to the center. So it's not user exclusive. There's no gate or fence around this. We also were able to adjust a few things, a few landscape islands in the parking lot, and increase significantly the number of trees we're trying to preserve. I believe at the January meeting, I think we had 11 or 12 we were saving, and we are now at 18. And that includes some really significantly large trees. One is a 54-inch at breast height. So we're really excited about that, actually. We have also up...
Do you want me to go back?
Yeah, if we could just go back for a second, Rob. I wanted to point out between buildings D and F, we have opened up more of a plaza feel in between those and increased the streetscape feel with the combination of outdoor dining areas, work study areas, and also some fire pits for casual socializing. And that also exists in the plaza by building E. Okay, next. As you can see, we've increased some information on our renderings, and that we are offering recreation for both children and adults. We will have outdoor work study areas that offer Wi-Fi and charging stations. We have fire pits scattered throughout the projects for leisure seating, and we also have table seating, outdoor dining options. These dining options are not enclosed in a fence and not limited to residents only or dining patrons. Anyone could take their lunch down from their apartment and sit outside. We also have over a quarter mile marked off on the site plan of a perimeter walking path. So it's like a track. You could get a quarter-mile walk, or if you did it 4 times, you'd have your mile in. And they also tie into the various trail connections around the property. So nearby. We have, next slide. This is, oh, go the other way, Rob. So also we responded to some questions that came up about the architecture, and we do now have elevators designed into all 4 buildings, even the 2-story. We have accessibility for all that would want to maybe live here. We have also divvied up the low-income housing. The affordable housing is 2 per building, so they are not all in one building and not exclusive to one building. So they are all throughout the project. We have added bathtubs to the 2 and 3 bedroom units. And as Rob mentioned, the roofs are solar ready. They are designed for the weight of solar panels, and when required, they are available to be ready to add that. Next slide. We have, as I mentioned, the bike parking storage. The requirements per the California Green Building Code is 14 slots of short-term bike racks. That's not 14 separate racks. It's just 14 bikes could park there. The long-term lockers per the code are 9 for the whole project, and bike maintenance stations are not something that's required. JMA is proposing 54 racks, 45 long-term bike lockers spread throughout the project at every building, and bike maintenance stations 2. There'd be one up by building D and F, and there'd be one outside building G on the plaza. This is a chart we put together about the tree preservation. We have, in addition to the trees we're preserving, we have about 199 other trees proposed for this project. So in addition to saving 18, we are adding new plants of 124, and that's just the trees. And those are per the development code, not necessarily the specific plan. As you can see on here, there are some large circles indicating the trees to be preserved, and they are scattered throughout the main plaza, and there are some in the parking and in the back towards the west. And as we said, we were able to preserve 18 of those. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rob to wrap this up. Thanks.
Thanks, Laura. So I want to show this bike connectivity. That was one of the questions that came up last time. And in phase 1, about 1.25 miles of Class 1 trails were constructed, and that connected the Hampton end all the way over to the north to Riverview Sports Park, and also to Highway 267, and then some improvements were done there. Some Class 2 bike paths were also constructed during phase 1. The great thing about phase 2 is there's a key connection there shown in purple that connects the Highway 267 intersection over to Martis Drive, and that will connect to the Truckee Trail system. So at the completion of phase 2, Soaring Ranch, actually Jorger Ranch, will all be connected all the way to downtown Truckee and over to Riverview Sports Park and to the Hampton. So tenant space, that was another question that came up of the visibility. It'll be very similar to the phase 1 pad building, as you can see here. The suites can accommodate large plates, but can also be easily divided into smaller spaces, as you can see here, and that'll be based on market demand. The final sizes of the floor spaces haven't been determined yet. This was already shown by staff. Excuse me. It's a streetscape showing from Soaring Way looking at the project, and you can see the trees lining the street along Soaring Way. Those will be scarlet maple, I believe, and those grow to somewhere between 30 and 50 feet. Here's another rendering that shows the two buildings. On the far right, you can see building D, which is the two-story building with the gable roofs, and next to it, front and center there, is three-story building, which is building F, with the flatter roofs, and then you can see the entrance there on the left. And as Laura mentioned in her presentation, the buildings have been moved back about 5 feet. It really allows us to activate that streetscape and provide some dining options or some outdoor options there in front along Soaring Way. So that concludes our presentation. I just want to wrap up by saying the project is consistent with the specific plan. That's the guiding document for this project. Obviously, also the town development code. There's huge public benefits for this project with the housing. The housing is geared towards the local workforce, as we discussed. 8 of them, the units will be restricted to low-income residents. There's been significant off-site improvements, a total of about $9 million in total between phases 1 and 2. The key trail connections that I talked about will allow this project to have connectivity all the way to downtown Truckee. The active streetscape along Soaring Way, and then all the outdoor spaces and main plaza. We think it's a really great design, and it's gotten better over the last couple of months working with staff. Lastly, I just want to say that it's not often that developers will offer up voluntary conditions of approval, but they have in this case because JMA is committed to a superior project, and they don't want to do just the minimum. So they've gone above and beyond and volunteered conditions to make sure that they go above and beyond in many aspects of this project. So that concludes our presentation, and happy to answer questions if you have any more.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob and Laura. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And so we're going to go ahead and move into commission clarifying questions for staff and applicants. So we'll start with commission clarifying questions for staff. And Commissioner Miller, would you like to lead us off, please?
I would. Thank you. I just have 2. Is Andy on the call? Is our lawyer here? Awesome.
I see him on there, yeah.
Yes.
Andy.
Hello.
Hello. It's never good to see the lawyer, but good to see you. What is our legal obligation here as planning commissioners? Is it to find the best product for the town, or is it to impartially interpret if the findings are made or not?
Well, hopefully you can do both, but in general, what you're doing is looking at compliance with the specific plan and the other documents that govern development in the town. The Planning Commission's role is not exactly in an abstract way to think about what's the best project for the community. As always, the Planning Commission is governed by the rules of the specific plan, the general plan, the zoning, and state law. There's some bits of state law that come into play as well. So as you deliberate, please bear that in mind, that it's not about is this the best project for the community? It's really, I think, and I hate to say this, but it is my job, is it consistent with the applicable documents? Can the Planning Commission make the findings necessary to approve the project? And if you think you cannot, then you would need to articulate your denial as an inability to make certain findings.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And another question for staff, I guess for Laura, what is allowable in the CR zoning designation that applies to this parcel?
Well, there's a number of uses that are outright permitted. Those would be primarily commercial uses, since it is supposed to be a regional commercial zone. Housing is allowed as a conditionally allowed use, which means that it requires the use permit to look at the compatibility of that use with the specific project site. If you are interested in some of the different uses that are allowed, I could pull up that part of the specific plan and we could walk through those.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Sorry to give a pop quiz while you're on camera.
Yeah, just give me a minute to pull that up.
Thanks. I'm happy to also let someone else. Those were my two questions, and I can take my answer whenever Laura's ready.
Laura, it starts on page 4.8 of the plan if you have it handy.
Dan, do you have any questions for staff while we give Laura a minute to look that up?
No, given that this is our third review, I've already asked all of my questions.
Gotcha. Okay. Susie, do you have questions for staff?
Well, I actually wanted Laura to bring up her, I think it was slide 2, where she had our subjects for discussion again at some point, but she's busy doing something else. So, yeah. And I think this is going to go for. This is going to need Andy to weigh in. So on the quick breeze through on that slide 2, her subject for discussion was whether or not this was consistent with the goals and objectives of the specific plan. And so if it's not consistent with the goals and objectives, but if it is allowed, does that mean you can deny it because it's not consistent with the plan?
Well, I would answer that by saying that one of the what's called a maximum of statutory construction applies here, which is that you have to interpret every bit of a law, including the specific plan, together, and you have to interpret them in a way that treats everything as being valid. So if the specific plan allows housing, which it does, then I think that by definition, housing has been deemed to be consistent with the goals and objectives of the specific plan. I think it would be very difficult to argue that something that's allowed by the specific plan is inconsistent with the specific plan. That doesn't really make any sense. So I think if you were able to find that something is inconsistent with the specific plan for some reason other than the fact that it's simply housing, certainly you can find inconsistencies with the specific plan, but I think that it would be difficult to find simply that the project is housing, therefore it's inconsistent with the goals of the specific plan. That's a difficult one.
So that's even if the goals are listed very specifically as being diverting retail leakage from Reno and providing space for large floor plate businesses which have a hard time in the rest of town. So even if those goals are specifically listed out, and this is not consistent with that, you can't find it inconsistent with the goals and objectives.
I think that it's difficult to find something inconsistent with the specific plan simply because it includes a use that the specific plan allows. You have to interpret the specific plan as a whole, so you can't say that housing by itself is inconsistent with the plan if it's allowed by the plan. I think that the goals and objectives of the plan have to be interpreted as allowing for some housing, and I think that the limited amount of commercial that's been built to date is in harmony with the overall objective of preventing retail leakage and bringing commercial to town. But again, very difficult to say that something allowed by the plan is inconsistent with the plan.
Laura, do you have what you were pulling up for?
Yeah, so some of the uses that are permitted in the regional commercial zone would be food and beverage distribution, indoor recreation centers, outdoor commercial recreation. See, just scrolling through here. Some service uses, banks, business support services, office, personal services. And then if you're interested in other uses that are conditionally allowed. Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see. So in addition to the multifamily, there's bars and drinking establishments would be use permit, convenience stores, Alcoholic beverage sales other than beer and wine would be a minor use permit.
It wasn't my goal to make you read the whole thing, but multifamily is allowed in conditional or in regional commercial conditionally. And what's the process? Could you remind me the process for that conditional approval? Is that the process we're already on, or is that something separate?
Yeah, that's the use permit entitlement that they're asking for this evening. So when it's a permitted use, it's just something that's allowed without any discretionary review, and typically would just be approved at the staff level through a zoning clearance. And then if it needs a use permit, then it comes to your commission to look at.
Thank you. I'll yield the rest of this flow back to Susie because she was in her questions.
So then that conditional use then hinges on what was in that slide number 2, the compatibility in the zoning district. And I think, can you pull up that slide number 2 again? I thought they were very important discussion points, and I want to make sure to have them written down, but they went by too fast. Okay. Oops, nope. There we go. No, I still want slide 2. Yes, thank you. Okay. So you're still asking, is the proposed mix of uses appropriate for a project within the regional commercial zoning district? Have all compatibility issues been addressed? Okay. All right. So I still look forward to talking about these, I guess, in discussion, but I don't think there's any, I guess just my only remaining question to staff was this ever what was thought of to be in this district? And that doesn't have to be you, Laura. That you can pass that to Jenna or Danielle or anybody.
Well, they can chime in, but the fact that, like Andy said, it's an allowed use would suggest that it was something that was contemplated as a possible future part of the regional commercial zone. If that was something that at the time was found to be inappropriate, then it would have been prohibited in that zone. So some amount of residential at the allowed density in the plan, we think would be consistent with the plan.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura.
Is that the extent of your questions for staff, Susie?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, would you like to just move in?
Can I ask one more staff question? I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Was the airport consulted about having residential development so close to their runway? Did they have a comment on this?
Yeah, I routed the project to them, to the Transportation Commission, and they looked at it with the densities that are proposed, and they felt that that was consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan and the previous review of the specific plan when they did look at all of the different types of uses that could be constructed on the site.
Thank you.
So they didn't feel that any additional analysis was needed.
Okay, any other clarifying questions for staff?
Wait, so and I asked this question on an email, but I still would like it to talk about it a little bit. So previously at a planning commission meeting, we had people holding a wedding over at the Grays Crossing, or weddings over at the Grays Crossing golf course, and they needed a special dispensation in order to do that because it was too dense a use near the airport. Now, why is this not considered that?
So Jenna or Danielle might be more familiar with that temporary use permit process since I didn't work on that. But I would think that potentially that required additional review because that use hadn't been previously looked at by the Airport Land Use Commission. as opposed to, in this case, it was part of a previous specific plan review that they had done, so they didn't need to do any additional review.
Well, and to some degree, it depends on what safety area you are in the land use plan for the airport. And the proximity of housing in this location is different because it's not underneath the runway, whereas the Grace Crossing area is more under a flight pattern. So there are different types of density restrictions when you are in or underneath, I should say, a flight pattern. I think that's my recollection of why they needed to go through a special process, because they would have several hundred people in an area that was identified for lower densities.
Okay, so what you're saying is that it's not. It doesn't matter that it's closer to the airport. It's not where they generally approach that runway or take off from the runway.
That's my understanding of why they had to go through a different process. Yes.
Yeah, there's different compatibility zones in the airport's land use plan. And so Jorger Ranch is mostly located in what they call Zone B1, which is inter-approach departure. And then Zone D, which is sort of their primary traffic patterns. And then when you go to the plan and look up sort of those zones, it gives you sort of what's allowed within that. And it's the same with when we did the pool for the rec district, and then when we did the temporary use permit review for Grace Crossing, that, you pull out the plan, we send it to the airport, we talk to them about it, and then look for that compatibility.
Okay, and so this is not a health and safety concern for future residents of this area, and it's been looked at and the risk has been assessed. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that wraps up clarifying questions for staff. Yes. Okay, great. Susie, do you want to go ahead and start with clarifying questions for the applicant?
Sure. I do have one. I just would love the applicant to explain to me their locals preference program and how that works. And I'd just like to hear a little bit more about it.
I think I'm going to let Art chime in on that one. He's more familiar with how they're going to set that up through the lease agreement. Art, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Susie, Commissioner Tornay, can you see me? It actually followed, I think, on the community discussion was going into Coburn. What we want to do is actually work with a community organization, be it the Mountain Housing Council or the Joint Powers Authority that was just set up to facilitate workforce housing for employees of local governmental and non-governmental organizations. And what Coburn did was basically drew the, I believe, the school district boundaries and said that the preference would apply to anybody who lived in or worked a minimum of 30 hours per week. So to avoid the, part-time situation, and that those people would get a preference in terms of being able to occupy the residences. To piggyback on that, what we suggested is that when any building opens, or if they, and I doubt they'll all open at once, because some buildings are sooner, are larger than others, that local residents and employees who meet that criteria would have, at least for 2 months, and we would advertise a preference in occupying those units. After, and assuming that the project leases up, we would keep a waiting list that again gives preference to people who live and work in the school district boundaries for any unoccupied units. And what we would hopefully do, as I said, is turn it over to a community organization subject to audit by the town on an annual basis to ensure we're doing what we said we would do. We would as a local employer in the area, I can tell you how difficult it is to recruit middle management and people to work in ski resorts or hotels or restaurants in the area because of the fact, quite candidly, that the housing's not affordable in the area. I think it's interesting to note that in the first phase of the project, even the 9,250 square foot building that is about to be completed now, the number one pushback we get from new tenants, people who really want to be in Truckee, is where my employees can live. You know, we don't want to have to recruit in Reno. We need housing for this workforce, and that, frankly, is the aim of the housing at the Soaring Ranch project, is to meet that need, which I can assure you is very, very acute and getting more problematic.
Okay. Thank you. So just a quick note, Coburn is not a preference. Coburn is deed restricted to locals. So your preference, it's for the first 2 months when a building opens, and then again when each apartment opens?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then I think we talked about it last time, but I honestly did not write it down. Did you have an estimate of what your rents are going to be like for a studio?
We are hopeful of keeping them lower than Coburn. Ultimately, in order to be financeable, the multifamily in particular has to be sustainable from an economic standpoint, and that's in some respects a function of the public improvements and the other things that go into it. But our hope is that it is going to be just over $2 a foot, which would put it below what Coburn is charging now. Now, that would vary, Commissioner Tornay, on the basis of whether it's a studio, a 1, or a 3. And obviously, it would vary on the basis of whether it's on top of the building or in the second floor of the building. You do have that pricing that goes into it. But overall, our hope is to keep this as affordable as possible. Because in many respects, we have aligned interests because we're trying to keep it affordable for the employees we hope to attract and hire in the area as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Susie, so is that all your clarifying questions for the applicant? Okay, great. Commissioner Miller?
None for me.
Commissioner Freeman?
Same, no questions.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and close clarifying questions for the staff and applicant and move into public comment. So let's open public comment. Carissa, have we heard any new public comment other than what has been presented to us at this point?
I have no new public comment. If you give me just a moment, I'd like to refresh our email inbox as well. No new texts or voicemails. I have none. The latest comment we received was from Mountain Area Preservation, and that was emailed to everybody.
That's right. We got that earlier today. Okay. And with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And the next item is opportunity for staff and applicant to respond to public comment. So does the staff or applicant have anything that they would like to respond to in the public comments that we have received? Okay.
Staff doesn't have any comments.
Okay. Mr. Chapman?
No, I don't think we have any comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I think we've addressed almost everything that came up.
Great. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and move into deliberation. Commissioner Miller, would you like to start?
Sure. I just want to start by saying how much I really did not enjoy this process. I feel for the applicant. I know it's difficult to build housing. I know that this process only drives up the cost of working with the community. And I appreciate and appreciate how heard I feel given the adjustments you made on our request, but I regret that this is the way that we had to go about it. I wish it were easier to do this more quickly, and that the specific plan had given clearer guidance that we were able to stick with and make a more transparent and reliable process. It's tempting as a planning commissioner, especially when it's not fair to blame public comment, but it's easy to focus on the details. And a lot of the comments we get from the community are on details. I failed to sit on my tongue or to hold my tongue and not comment that I'd love to see the trees between the sidewalk and the road, but like, that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about the findings. I feel like I can support these findings as they're written.
Okay.
And I'd be curious to get a temperature check from others.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to the others. Commissioner Freeman.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I agree with Ruth. I mean, we kind of have some rules that are established based on the specific plan, and ultimately the applicant is submitting a project within those guidelines. I would probably have some conditions of approval I'd like to see added, but I don't know if we can make the findings to deny this project. I can go through some of the conditions of approval that I'd like to see added.
Why don't we hold off on that for now and
sure.
check in with Commissioner Tarnay, and I'd like to comment as well. So, Susie?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last thing you said there, Dave. What was that?
Oh, I just wanted to find out where you're at on this.
Okay, thank you. So I also want to say I feel incredibly heard. I feel heard all the way down to the water meters in the conditions of approval, and that's amazing, and I really, really appreciate that. I feel also I still feel somewhat conflicted in that I'm being told by the lawyer that I do not have grounds to deny this, and yet I do not see this as consistent with the specific plan goals and objectives. And I looked and I read the specific plan and looked in the section titled Vision and Goals, and that was about retail. I feel conflicted, and I feel that the reason that we've had such a hard time with this project is because it is not consistent with the goals and objectives. It is being smashed into a spot where it was not designed to be. This was designed to be retail and commercial, and have our goals changed? Yes, but is it my place to say that I can approve it because our goals have changed, or is it my place to say that I can make the findings that it's consistent with the specific plan? So I just want it to be said that I too feel that this is unfair to the applicant. I feel that something should have happened a lot earlier in this process to sort of assess those goals and objectives of the specific plan and whether or not this meets those. So I too did not enjoy this process. I love policy and I love digging into these things, but I don't. Some of the questions feel sort of pedantic and based on syntax, and that doesn't feel like we're striving for what is best for the community. So I would like to really quickly take the temperature of the rest of the commission about the bike lane. So there is a bike lane that is required to be built. That is the 1,100 linear feet along Brockway Road. There is another section of bike lane that is supposed to be built along Hope Court. The town engineer has determined that he can say that can be built at phase 3. But I'm a little concerned that now we're heading into a specific plan amendment process, and which may require more concessions from the developers. And so I'm concerned that we are postponing that to something that the rules may change on, and it's going to make it less appealing to build it then. I would like to see how anybody feels about giving up, I don't know, give up the work study areas or the computer charging areas in order to have that the bike lane built along Hope Court. And I would also like to note that we have just had in this most recent article in Moonshine Inc. about how they are working on extending that all the way up to North Star. And I feel that it is really part of the connectivity of this. It is also part of what I'm striving for, to make things easier to get to without a car. So I just want to throw that out there. The whole thing makes me uncomfortable. From Laura's slides, I don't feel it's consistent with the goals and objectives, because those were all about retail. And I wish that there were a way to figure out a way to have this project and phase one actually provide the workforce housing that they are producing, because somebody who works at a retail shop is not going to be able to afford $1,000 500 square foot studio. One other thing that I wanted to point out while just reading through the specific plan with a fine-tooth comb is that even though it does, somehow it got worked around, that the RMW property does not need to have any deed restrictions as far as income goes. It was very specifically one of the policies when they were building the specific plan. And so I'm going to read it real quick because I like to quote things. So PC3, Policy 6, the specific plan shall include provisions for supplying on-site the required housing for 50% of the very low, and moderate income workforce associated with the development of the site. That is a guiding policy of this entire plan, and it is completely disregarded with nothing sort of given back in return. And I understand trying to incentivize somebody to build that, but that's where I stand. I'm uncomfortable, and that's it.
Okay, thank you, Susie. And as usual, I appreciate you being so thorough. I would also like to echo the sentiments of the other commissioners that this has been an arduous process. And I'd also like to echo the sentiments of some of my other commissioners that I commend the applicant for hearing what public comment and also the commission has had to say. You know, there's 3 iterations that we've seen now. We've seen a lot of improvement on this project, and I'm grateful that that the applicant is listening to us and making those changes. I also understand the frustrations that Commissioner Tarnay has in what seems to be some conflicting kind of guidance, I guess, would be from our governing documents. But at the same time, I also hear the concerns of council that we also have to, we've got a set of guidelines, and developers and property owners have rights, and we've told them the rules to play by, and so that's where we're at. So I don't know how much further we need to deliberate this, but I believe Commissioner Freeman said that he wanted to take a deeper dive on some possible conditions of approval and change and address some stuff like that. Dan, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. Also, I would like to thank the applicant. I think you guys done a great job kind of raising the bar from the initial submittal we saw back in December, and again, what we saw in January. And I think, it's going to make for a better project. I'm going to try not to ask you to raise the bar too much more, but I kind of echo Susie's sentiment about the Hope Court bike path section. And I don't know, do we really need to get rid of the other items that we've already kind of agreed to, or can we just add the bike path?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of, we asked last month that we would, have some bike storage and Wi-Fi and this and that and the other. Like, let's not, just abandon that. I have concerns too that the way it's structured now, it's going to be difficult for more developers going forward to meet the requirements of what we have for the specific plan on this. So, there was a public comment that bike path was part of the initial EIR, and if it's questionable that there's going to be phase 3, 4, 5 or whatever of this, then that's something that we need to take a serious look at right now.
So I guess that's the one thing I would like to see. I'm sure we could come up with a bunch of other conditions, but that's the most important one to me, is to see that as part of this phase 2, that section of bike path is also complete.
I have another sort of structural question. In terms of making the findings, to what extent are we supposed to be asking these questions about, is phase 3 likely to actually happen? Do we, thanks for hopping on, Andy, but the phase are we evaluating the phase as it's written, or the phase as it is proposed to make the rest of the project likely to roll out?
Well, I think that in the conditions of approval right now, it says that the other thing must be built with phase 3. I mean, I think it's already addressed. I don't think we're stepping outside of any bounds.
But that assumes that phase 3 is going to pencil out and that someone will actually do phase 3.
It does, and that's the concern, right?
Yeah. So do we need to assume that phase 3 will happen, or can we speak to these larger questions of, I think this is our last chance, so we should hold this phase accountable for plan-wide outcomes?
I would suggest that that speculation about whether phase 3 will happen is not maybe the right basis upon which to make a decision. I think that the better approach would be to attempt to determine whether the bike trail is necessary for this phase, because really what you're talking about is creating conditions of approval for this phase of the project without regard to what future phases might look like or if they're going to happen. So if the commission thinks that the bike trail really is necessary for this phase and that it should properly be constructed in this phase, that's the way to frame it, and that's the way to think of it, I think.
Thanks, Andy. I mean, the goal is to have connectivity, pedestrian connectivity throughout town, is it not? And so if we're increasing this project from a housing density standpoint, it seems like that bike path is pretty important in my mind. Is I'm seeing Susie. I'm getting a couple heads nodding here. Ruth, is that a yes or a no? This looks like a weeble wobble. Where are we at?
It's a weeble wobble. Yeah, technical
use
term.
your words, Ruth.
I'm torn on this. It's difficult to tie this specific phase to that specific segment of the bike network. As much as I want a very awesome and complete bike network, I think the phase that they're doing on Brockway is easier to tie in. I don't as clearly see the connection to this one in my mind, as much as I would like to.
They are required to do that other phase. That isn't a concession on their part. That was required to do the one on Brockway.
Okay.
I would be prepared to make a motion with that one condition.
Okay.
Make it.
Can you pull up the language, Jenna?
Laura?
Laura?
Do you have the slide handy? Then she'll share her screen in just a minute.
I can find it here.
Take your time. We did this for 5 hours last month. We've only been here for 59 minutes, so we're looking good.
So I will make a motion to adopt Resolution 2020-24, determining the project is consistent with the adopted Yoga Ranch specific plan and thereby precluding any further environmental review consistent with CEQA, Section 15183, and Public Resources Code, Section 21166, and the CEQA Guidelines, Section 15162, and approving the development permit amendment, plan development amendment, tentative map amendment, and use permit based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval, with the condition of approval that the Hope Court bike path also be constructed during prior to the completion of phase 2.
Do I hear a second? I'll second. Krista, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Gove,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tarnay,
Oh, don't we usually go in the other direction?
I can go the other direction.
No, this direction's fine.
Chair, then vice. You're the vice chair. What's it?
I'm still very uncomfortable in saying that it's consistent, making finding number 2, that it's consistent with the specific plan when it's not consistent with the goals and objectives. And I don't know.
So, Susie, just to clarify, this is a roll call vote. Robert's Rules of Order. You have choices are yes, no, or abstain.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Laura, do you want to give the appeal timeframe again?
Yes, so the appeal period ends at 5 p.m. on February 26th.
Okay, very good. And I'd like to one more time thank the applicant for listening to all of the comments, and we wish you good luck with your project. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute recess. It is 6:12 p.m. We'll reconvene at 6:32. All right, it's 6:22 p.m., so I would like to call this February 16th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting back to order, reconvening. It looks like we have everybody here except for Commissioner Freeman.
We believe that Commissioner Freeman is done with the hearing this evening.
Okay.
So you'll just have 3 remaining commissioners.
Okay, and is that a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you. So moving on to agenda item 7.2, which is for the Crestwood Construction Industrial Building, application number 2020-92. For those of you watching at home, if you would like to submit public comment, please call or text 530-428-6555 now, and your comments will be read or heard during the meeting. Are there any commissioner recusals or disclosures?
I also talked about this project with the government affairs lead for CAT.
Okay, so I feel like I only caught half of that comment. Can you just...
Sorry, I also spoke about not so much this project in particular, but projects like this with, I'm so sorry, I forget his name, but the government affairs representative for the Contractors Association.
Okay, so when you say you're referring to it previously in the meeting when you spoke with that same, gotcha.
It came up on the same call, yeah.
Got it. Okay, very good. Commissioner Tarnay?
I've spoken with Ruth about this, which I'm now concerned. There's only 3 of us left.
Is that a Brown Act issue?
I believe it's a Brown Act issue if you speak with more than one other commissioner about...
I'm just saying there's only 3 of us left now as a voting body.
It's not so long as you didn't talk to each other about how you were planning on voting or your opinions. You were just, asking each other general questions. That's totally okay.
Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. I have not talked to anybody about this project. So moving on from recusals and disclosures, we're going to move into staff presentation, and it's Chantel's floor.
Thank you, Chair Grove. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
We're good to go? Awesome. So good evening. Item 7.2 is the Crestwood Construction Industrial Building. The project is located at 10980 Industrial Way in the Truckee Industrial Park subdivision. The 1-acre site is zoned manufacturing, and the general plan land use designation is industrial. The site is surrounded by developed industrial parcels with the exception of a residential zone parcel to the north, which is the Pine Forest HOA common area. The site is currently approved and used as an outdoor construction contractor's yard by the applicant, which is Crestwood Construction. The applicant is proposing to construct an 8,800 square foot industrial shell building. The building contains 8 units. Each is 1,100 square feet and includes a small office and restroom. The building has removable partition walls, allowing for the units to be combined according to tenant demand. And a paved outdoor vehicle and material storage is included. Crestwood plans to occupy 1 to 2 of the units. Land use entitlements that are required this evening is a development permit for permitted uses proposing 7,500 square feet or more of floor area. And the applicant is also requesting sign plan approval to approve signage for the multi-tenant site. So the applicant is not requesting any deviations from our development standards for the manufacturing zone district this evening. The proposed coverage, floor area, parking, snow storage, and open space meet all of the manufacturing general development standards. The proposed 1-story building is approximately 29 feet in height. Each unit has a roll-up door that opens into the main industrial space and a glass entrance door that would lead customers into the office. The building is proposed to be constructed of metal siding in rustic red and slate gray with the roll-up doors in a color called silhouette gray. The door and window frames are proposed in bronze. Project lighting will be located inside of the awning that also kind of serves to break up the massing of the single-story industrial building. Concrete wainscoting is proposed around the perimeter of the building as well. Staff did request additional articulation on the southern elevation, as this is the elevation that fronts the street. The applicant responded with some additional windows, but would prefer not to add them as they believe it precludes the full use of the wall plane for storage, creates an additional security risk, and would be obscured by proposed landscaping and the existing fencing. Staff did add condition of approval number 37 requiring the addition of the south elevation windows. The commission can discuss whether they agree with staff's opinion, if they would like additional or alternate articulation, or would want to remove the condition of approval. As mentioned earlier, the floor plan of the shell building includes 8 units with a small office and restroom, and the removal of the partition walls can be configured into larger units. And I'm not sure if you can see my arrow, but these are the partition walls running this way, so you can make larger units as tenants would request them. The proposed sign plan includes window signage located on the tenant doors. The signage would include the suite address, a tenant logo. It would be a maximum of 10 square feet with vinyl stencil lettering, and there's no lighting proposed. And this is consistent with our development code section 1854080F for window signs. There is an existing previously approved monument sign that will remain as is. So the required findings ask us if a project is consistent with our general plan, and this project is an industrial building project located in the general plan's industrial land use designation. The project is creating additional space for light industrial uses in our town. It's located inside of an industrial park and supports general plan economic policies. And is also designed in a way to be sensitive to those residential uses in the north part of the project site. The proposed project is also consistent with our development code. As we previously discussed, the project meets all of the manufacturing zone district development standards. The project will meet its workforce housing requirement by the payment of a fraction of the in lieu affordable housing fee. This fee will be required to be paid prior to building permit issuance. Following our development code workforce housing calculations, the project is responsible for 0.308 of a workforce housing unit. This would translate to the payment of about approximately $29,000 or 30.8% of the in lieu fee. So the development code design guidelines are intended as a guide to assist project designers in understanding the town's goal for high quality development that's sensitive to Truckee's character. The review authority, in this case the Planning Commission, may interpret the design guidelines with some flexibility in their application specific to the project, as not all design criteria may be workable or appropriate depending on the project. In some circumstances, guidelines may be relaxed to facilitate compliance with other guidelines that the Commission might find more important. The overall objective is to ensure that the intent and the spirit of the design guidelines are followed. The development code design guidelines for industrial uses places a higher regard for site planning and screening over architectural design. The guidelines are intended to protect adjacent uses from objectionable views, excessive noise, and similar impacts that are associated with industrial use. The project storage area are all screened either by building walls or landscaping, and there are additional conditions of approval that will ensure that the landscaping and the proposed northern wall will function to further screen parking and storage from public views. The proposed project provides some variation in colors and materials and appears as a true industrial building. Staff has recommended that the additional articulation be added to the southern elevation. As I mentioned, it was located on the street frontage. In the staff report, as I mentioned in the staff report, the Commission can retain this condition of approval and or add others if they find that the building or site design requires additional consistency with these guidelines. This slide highlights some other conditions of approval that ensure consistency with our development code. I highlighted workforce housing. We have a parking condition, exterior lighting, signage, landscaping, tree removal, noise, and solid waste. All have conditions that ensure consistency with our development code. And as of this moment right now, no public comments have been received on the project. So staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2020-102, determining the project to be exempt from CEQA per Section 15332 of the CEQA guidelines, and approve the development permit and sign plan based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. As always, there are alternative actions that the Commission could take this evening. The Commission can choose to continue the public hearing to date and time certain. The Commission may request additional information from the applicant or staff. The Commission could find that the exemption to CEQA is not suitable and require the preparation of initial study in accordance with CEQA. The Commission may approve the development permit and sign plan subject to adding, modifying, or eliminating any provision or condition of approval of the project. Or lastly, the Commission could deny the project on the basis that all of the required findings could not be made. The appeal period for this project ends on February 26th at 5 p.m. And I'm available for questions. The project's agent, Gavin Ball, is also on the call. I do not believe he has a presentation, so we're probably both available for questions.
Thank you, Chantel. Gavin, is that correct? You do not have a presentation, but you're here to answer any questions?
That's exactly right. I think Chantal covered it accurately and appropriately.
Okay, great. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and move to public comment. Chantel had just mentioned that we haven't heard any public comment on this. Can you confirm that, Carissa?
I can confirm I have no voicemails, no texts, and no emails.
Okay, with that, we'll close public comment. And then we'll forego the opportunity for applicant and staff to respond to the public comments that didn't exist and move into deliberation. So,
or questions?
yeah, sorry about that. Forgive me, Susie. I got ahead of myself. We need to go to clarifying questions for staff and the applicant. So let's go ahead and start with Commissioner Tarnay with clarifying questions for staff and the applicant.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to start with
staff.
Staff has asked a lot of, staff has answered some of my questions, but I'm going to ask them just because I do think they're important to sort of talk about. So the site is, in the report, it says the site is surrounded by developed industrial parcels to the east, west, and south, and to the north is a common area parcel for Pine Forest Owners Association. But you can also see in some of the maps that there's sort of part of a wetland delineation there. So that's not quantified or called a wetland instead of residential use?
It's not actually a delineated, oh my gosh.
We can hear you. You're good. We heard you.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah.
It keeps telling me I'm muted. Great. It's not actually a delineated wetland. It is a seasonal creek, and there is a 100-year floodplain. And you can see on the site plan, and I could bring it back up, there is a 50-foot setback. It's just at the northeast corner of the parcel, but nowhere near any of the development. And so the actual use is residential.
Okay, and that you wouldn't be able to build in that 50-foot setback, though. That's just that little top right-hand corner. Okay, thank you.
That is correct.
Awesome. So originally it says in here that this was recorded with a 50-foot no disturbance zone. Can you tell me what was the purpose of that, and then why was it removed?
Sure. So when the Truckee Industrial Park subdivision map was recorded, there from a prior subdivision map was a no disturbance zone or no building zone. In the first iteration of the subdivision, they called it a no disturbance zone. And this was in advance of really studying the creek. And it was kind of to protect what might be a setback from the creek. So a year after, in 2004, that release of covenant occurred, and they removed that no disturbance zone, saying that now that as part of the environmental document for the subdivision, they've mapped the creek, they know where the 100-year floodplain is, and they put a 50-foot setback from there. So that disturbance zone was no longer needed.
Great, thank you. That actually clarifies it even more than your answer to me earlier in the day. So, I don't know if you can bring up the plan for it. On our report, it was page 32. They sort of showed a disposal truck and radius. And I don't know what the answer to this is. Does that mean that the disposal truck is backing into that trash disposal area from the cul-de-sac or from the road? Are they on the cul-de-sac or the road? They're still on the road, right?
kind of the tip of the cul-de-sac, I guess. You know, I would maybe let Gavin answer that question. I do know that the original design was, and I'm sharing the screen, I maybe could go in a little bit more. The original design was not satisfactory for our solid waste division, but this design was approved by our solid waste department, saying that this, and they had given conditions that this radius would work for waste for trash removal.
Okay, so does that mean that the trash truck is backing into there? I guess that's for the maybe applicant. I can ask it later. I just don't understand what I'm looking at. So,
I mean, I guess it would matter. It would be determined by if the truck picks up those large dumpsters in the front and tosses it in the back, or if it occurs the other way.
Okay, so but I guess they'll be backing regardless, whether it's pulling in forwards or backing out. It's not going to turn around. Okay, thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about this slatted fence? Does it go all the way around the property? It sounds like the slatted fence goes across the front of the building, and then there was something about the slatted fence across the back of the property as well.
I believe that the slatted fence is currently existing and approved per the zoning clearance in 2013. My understanding, and I will also let Gavin maybe tell me if I'm wrong, the slatted fence goes across the front and the side, the perimeter of the building. I do not believe it's currently in the back, in the rear of the building or the northern elevation. And that's where it's existing. And then as part of one of our conditions of approval, per our development code, the separation between the residential use and the industrial use would require a 6-foot solid masonry fence. So that is a conditional approval of the project.
Okay, so the fencing is on the south and both the east and the west? Okay. Okay, and then you and I talked a little bit about the landscaping plan. Now, is that currently meeting all the requirements of landscaping for this area?
The preliminary plan is doing a pretty good job for meeting the landscape, the preliminary landscaping plan. It is a custom that we would finalize a landscaping plan at building permit issuance or during the building permit review process. And so that's how it's been conditioned in the project. There might need to be some additional trees per 20 square feet on the side. But I think I would want to look at that as I look at the site as a whole to make sure that the landscaping plan is doing the intent, which is providing screening all the way, through the side, in the front, and potentially in the back. There is that no disturbance zone that does exist, is forested. And so there might not be a need to put additional landscaping back there after the wall is there, but that's something that we will definitely take a look at and ensure meets our development code standards during the building permit process.
Okay, and that solid wall that you're talking about at the back, that's to prevent noises from this type of area?
I think it's for noise, for views. It's to provide a clear and defined separation between a residential use and an industrial use. Okay. And then I think I just have one or two more quick questions, but the outside storage area was originally unpaved, but now that whole outside storage area is paved, and it will be part of the snow storage area? The outside, the paved seasonal vehicle storage area will not be used. It won't be utilized in the winter, and the snow will not be removed there. So it's not counted as part of the snow storage calculations, but it's also not going to be added into the snow storage because it won't be plowed.
Okay, thank you. That actually is a great clarification there. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. Other than I was going to ask the applicant something. I can't remember now. Okay, I'm passing it on. I'm done.
Okay, Commissioner Miller, clarifying questions for the applicant, or excuse me, for staff.
Yeah, could you describe the materials, textures, and colors that are proposed for the south facade?
It is this for me or for Gavin?
It might be more appropriate for Gavin, now that you ask.
So let's, so before Gavin jumps in, Commissioner Miller, do you have any clarifying questions for staff?
That was my last one, or my only question for anyone.
Okay, so before we jump into clarifying questions for the applicant, I do have a question for staff, and it's about the second story glazing that's been requested. So I understand that we're looking to break up the massing of the second story by adding windows. Is that correct?
No, so there's only one story on the building. This was the south frontage, and staff requested that there be additional articulation. The applicant proposed the windows, the additional glazing, as that additional articulation.
Okay, so the applicant proposed that, but they don't want that. Is that right?
Gavin, would you? Yes, that was what was indicated in response letter. I think that the applicant will do it, but they have some concern over the location.
Can you weigh in on that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we think the building, and it's also to Ruth's question about seemingly the colors and textures idea and question mark. Really, the building is designed to be really simple and functional. It's an industrial building, on Industrial Way in the industrial Truckee Park. It's on a cul-de-sac. It's back to back with a very large, comparably sized industrial building. It has a perimeter fence and landscaping. It's on the cul-de-sac. It's not visible from the residential neighborhood. We think it's just a really simple, functional building. That was the reason why, along with the other reasons for security and just the low visibility of that south facade, as it has a very minimal, small frontage on the cul-de-sac, that we thought that kind of articulation was needed for this kind of industrial building in an industrial park. So kept it really simple, pretty functional. True, we did add the lower glazing as a way of providing some additional interest as it faces that cul-de-sac. It's not the owner's preference, for a lot of reasons, starting with interior use of the building and the storage of other larger things and wood and materials that a contractor would normally have on site, and the security issue and the low visibility issue. So we think we're happy to do it if it comes down to that's a piece of architecture or a piece of articulation that would help in the building design. That's fine, we can do that, but it certainly is not the preference by the owner.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That answers my question. So my question for then staff now is then, is there any, there's no like management plan in regards to like glazing, right? Like there's no rules in place of like when you have to clean your windows and if what's on the other side, or if the windows have to be transparent or translucent, are there?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not. There might be something about reflectivity. I mean, maybe Jenna or Danielle might know off the top of their head when it, like we wouldn't maybe want a highly shiny aluminum looking window that, fronts to the street. But I can't think of anything that would control, if it was transparent or not.
No, we don't have anything.
Okay. So, I mean, what I'm wondering is that, if it's, the town's desire is to have, some articulation in the massing, and the thought was to put some windows on there, but the applicant's desire was to not have those windows so they could have that vertical storage or whatever it is, the usage of space, however they desire on the inside of their building. Maybe if we wanted to, instead of requiring windows, they could be a faux window, a plant-on detail on the outside that looks like a window that has a curtain on the inside, something like that.
I mean, that's for the commission to discuss. What I will say, though, is that the design guidelines are pretty specific about truth and materials. So if you're going to create a window, it should be a functional window. Mm-hmm. So I think from a staff perspective, the preference would be to not have windows if it wasn't going to be a real window.
Got it. All right, fair enough.
Can I ask one more staff question?
Yes.
Okay. I think I don't know this before, maybe Danielle, but can you tell me what the word articulation means when you're talking about architecture?
I'll let Chantal jump into this if she wants to, but typically articulation is some sort of variation, usually in depth of materials, in sort of the types. So oftentimes you'll see it step off the building a couple feet. That's an articulation. It might have an eyebrow kind of added onto something so that there's, just depth created, which is more so what it is, where you wouldn't typically see a window added unless it was like a window box where it had, sort of an inset and then some depth created by that.
Thank you.
Chantal, did you want to add to that or no?
No, I think that Danelle is correct. I looked it up today there's a variety of definitions, and after Commissioner Tarnay asked me about it earlier, but it has to do with depth. It has to do with expression of a building. I think the awning you can consider the awning that goes around the building as part of the articulation. The addition of the concrete that steps out further articulates the building. It's just, it doesn't have to necessarily be a full adjustment of plane, but it just provides some additional design elements so you don't have that single massing.
Thanks, Chantal. Susie, anything else for staff?
No, I would like to discuss things.
Okay, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I guess just that the trash enclosure that requires does the trash truck have to back in there? Do you know?
Yeah, the trash truck is going to come in forward and pick it up, lift it up, dispose of it in the truck, and then back up. It's the reason for that minimum turning radius that's shown in between the cul-de-sac and the front door of the trash enclosure.
Okay, so it does have to, there's no turnaround or anything. It's just, okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Miller, any clarifying questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just to restate that question. So in the south facade view that we're evaluating, the only materials on that face are metal and glass and windows, correct?
There's a concrete wainscot at the bottom. I think it's 3 or 4 feet high, but it's also at the base. It's not going to be visible from anywhere because of the perimeter fencing. That's the similar argument to the lack of real architectural benefit or interest with the lower window addition on that south facade, because it also is going to be marginally, if at all, visible.
Okay, thank you.
Particularly from the street.
So again, there's fencing across in front of that southern wall and then on the east and west.
True. It's perimeter fencing, existing and proposed. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, got it. So I guess basically the applicant's saying that the angle of incidence with that fence to where the roof, the building is, you're not going to see any of that stuff. Okay. Okay. So any other questions for staff or the applicant at this point, commissioners? No? Okay. All right. Well, I got ahead of myself before, but now it's time for public comment. Have we heard any new public comment while we've been asking these questions?
We have not.
Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And having no public comment, we will not give the staff or the applicant the opportunity to respond to public comment that did not exist. So we'll announce the commission deliberation. Commissioner Miller, would you like to start?
Sure. Learning a lot from the Soaring Ranch process and wanting to keep this as tight as possible on the development code. I have some questions about how this meets the design guidelines, just to cite some things to get them into the record. Avoid blank front walls, avoid the use of color change in place of architectural detailing. There's a lot of language here about emphasizing the front entrance under general design objectives for industrial park business uses. Item 1B is the main entrance of the building should be prominently located to ensure visibility from the nearest public right-of-way. next section, prominent building entries. I understand there's not one specific entrance for this entire space, but it feels like they're saying they want a front door, and this project doesn't have that. And I understand we're trying to break it up, and I hear that the applicant's points that the things that have been asked for currently don't do a good job of that. So that makes me feel like we should be pushing for more. I don't see consistency currently with having a door around the side and windows that no one wants on the front. That doesn't, to me, match the design objective stated in the development code.
Okay.
So I would propose a condition of approval that redirects the front door to the front, so we could pass this tonight.
Okay, fair enough. Commissioner Carney?
Yeah, I feel that there's a lot of things in this design guidelines that are not addressed in any way. Not only the ones that she mentioned, but also there is a part of the design guidelines that talks about backing in is frowned upon. There's also a part where it talks about landscaping is recommended to surround the entire base of the building. I'm just, there's so many things in here where it says prefab metal buildings should be designed to have architectural interest. Metal buildings should employ a variety of building forms. And it says, and this is just for industrial buildings, and it fully acknowledges that industrial buildings are going to be more simple, and yet I still think that there's many things that aren't being addressed or even nodded to in any way. So I would say right now, as it is, I cannot make the finding that this proposed development is consistent with the design guidelines, because there's so much more that this design guidelines is actually asking for. I agree that prominent front door is one of the main ones, and I understand that it's simple. I understand that it's at the back of a cul-de-sac, and yet what concerns me is something that they actually wrote in their letter of justification. We would ask that the Staff and Planning Commission consider other more recently approved commercial developments that have similar, while often being more visible, non-window wall planes. That's not how we decide this. We don't decide whether or not this is got a precedent. We decide whether or not it's meeting the design guidelines. And what I would really like is, if these design guidelines are not objective enough, they need to be fixed. If I'm just uncomfortable in ignoring code because it's a guideline. That's all I have.
Okay, so Commissioner Miller, I'm seeing you nod your head with a lot of the comments that Commissioner Tarnay is making. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, in general, I agree. I'm sympathetic that this can be a difficult process, similar to our last applicant. I know this is an arduous lift to get through guidelines, but if we don't want to adhere to the guidelines or the design code, if we don't want to follow it, we should amend the code. We shouldn't try to follow precedent and create a messy process. Our job as Planning Commission isn't to decide what's appropriate for the community or what guidelines and design is appropriate. Our job is to decide, from what I understand from our lawyer, our job is to decide if the guidelines that we've agreed to as a community are reflected in this proposal. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that. I think it's close, and I think we could recommend some, if they're amenable to the applicant, some conditions of approval to get them there. But I would not be comfortable approving this project as it's been proposed.
Okay. Yeah, I question. I question some of the design guidelines too, especially when we take into consideration that some of the things that are asked for industrial buildings may not be visible to the street due to the angle of incidence with the fence. It seems to me a little, onerous to have an industrial building have all this articulation that you can't see when the fencing and screening is taken into consideration. So my question really is not, here's where I struggle right now, is that, we are a commission of 5 and there's 3 of us here. And as much as it was painful for the previous applicant in tonight's meeting to go through 4 iterations. Like, I feel like I struggle with trying to make a decision on this tonight when we're missing 2 commissioners. How do you feel about that?
I would love to get the applicant's temperature on that.
Gavin?
Well, the temperature is that it certainly is better to have all 5 planning commissioners available than just 3. We totally agree with that. We don't seem to have much control about that. I don't have any understanding of why they're not here. But I'm uncertain of what the question is. It sounds as if you're asking us if we would like to continue it to another meeting to have another planning commissioner to participate.
My guess is, given the 3 of us that have spoken, that 2 of us would like to add conditions of approval that require more variation in texture on the front, and our 3rd member would like other votes that perhaps might push us in a different direction. Would you like to have the 3 of us with perhaps a majority pushing towards conditions of approval, or would you like to wait a month, roll the dice, and see how the 5 of us land as a majority?
So Gavin, before you answer that, let me just step in for a minute. We are going to have a change in planning commission, and it's likely that that will happen before the council meeting on the 23rd. So our understanding is Commissioner Hall is this was going to be her last meeting just by choice. So you wouldn't necessarily get the same commission if you postpone this until March. So I think in fairness to the applicant team, if there are things that you think are workable to find consistency with the design guidelines that can be applied as conditions, that would be a fair approach for them. I will point out too that the design guidelines are intended so that you can kind of look at them in total, but you can make, your own findings of flexibility depending on the specific circumstances of the site. So far, there's been sort of this question of how much is visible from the street versus, the sort of true letter of what the guidelines are. They were never written to apply all of them all at the same time in every context. So I would just encourage you to kind of think about that as you work through whether you want to apply conditions to this project or not. I mean, it basically says in the development code, you as the review body have the authority to interpret the design guidelines, but within that have flexibility on their application for the specific projects.
Thank you, Danielle. So I've spent a fair amount of time in that area, and it is industrial, and it is an industrial use. And I'd argue that most of the users that are in that area are not out there enjoying the architectural significance of these buildings. It's all very utilitarian. And for me personally, I don't see, I understand that as a community, we want to have interesting looking buildings, and that's an importance in a lot of areas. For me, that's not an important in this area. And I don't have a problem with the project as it's proposed. And I would be willing to approve it as proposed tonight.
I've spent, I'm sure, much less time than you just by virtue of not being a developer and not having lived in Truckee as long, but I feel like all the other buildings have been able to follow these guidelines, and it doesn't strike me as fair to make an exception for one of the latecomers.
Fair enough.
And I agree, many of the other buildings there, I think one of them has a fountain in front. They have lots of articulation. They have main doors. At least if there's multiple buildings per lot, at least one of those buildings is definitely addressing that, the cul-de-sac there. I do, again, feel this is the second time that a project in this area has come up where I said I'm uncomfortable with this, and unfortunately it hasn't been addressed. And I think, again, if these design guidelines are not working, then go through the public process to change them. But just choosing to not enforce them isn't our job.
I would like to propose a condition of approval that might get us moving forward. Totally open to language here, but something along the lines of approved should the south facade incorporate surfaces including either stone, brick, wood, or decorative masonry that emphasize the primary entrance to the building. And that's a combination of 2 lines from the design code.
And does that mean that means making a primary entrance on that south facade as well? Correct.
Emphasizing a primary entrance to the building on that facade. Yeah.
Okay, so are you proposing a conditional approval, or are you proposing a motion with the condition of approval?
This is my first one. Thank you. I'm proposing a motion with the condition of approval that I just read, and I'd be happy to read a slide with other language if planner would be happy to put that up.
Staff, can we have that slide, please?
And I just want to say again to the applicant, this is what we have tonight. I don't know what happens now, Danielle, about if he wants to continue or not, or what. I'm just
so that's our choice.
That open.
It's not the applicant's choice. So it's our choice as the commission to decide whether or not we want to make a motion with conditions or to continue. So I mean, we've asked the applicant to weigh in a little bit, but now it sounds like Commissioner Miller is willing to make a motion to approve with a condition. So then at that point we would hear a second or not. And if we didn't hear a second, then we'd figure out what was next. But if we hear a second, then we'll go to a vote.
Right. So the process, I think, got confusing just because sometimes if we're continuing or the commission is leaning towards denial, that's when we've paused and gone back and asked the applicant.
And I'd like to ask.
I think we can approve with one condition. Go ahead.
Hold on. Okay. Chantel, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted a little bit of direction because I haven't done one of these for one of my projects yet. Am I making a slide that includes Commissioner Miller's condition of approval as part of the staff recommendation for adoption? No. Okay.
You're going to bring up the slide.
What slide were you asking for?
You're going to bring up the slide that has the language of the original staff recommendation. And then Commissioner Miller is going to articulate what that proposed condition of approval is.
Got it.
So I propose that we adopt resolution 2021-02, determining the project to be exempt from CEQA per section 15332 of the CEQA guidelines, and approve the development permit and sign plan based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval, including an additional condition of approval that the south facade should incorporate surfaces including stone, brick, wood, or decorative masonry, emphasizing a primary entrance to the building on that facade.
Do I hear a second?
Yes, you do. I second.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Gove?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tarnay?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Gavin, thank you very much for your participation tonight, and good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on from section 7, we're moving into number 8, staff reports. Seeing none, we'll move on to number 9, information items. 9.1 is for upcoming commission meetings and agenda. Jenna, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Chair Gove. Okay, get out your calendars. I have a few things for you this evening. Not sure if all of these are on your radar, so I'll go a little bit slow. February 23rd, so that's next week. The commission is invited to a joint session with the town council. They will be we will be giving a presentation next week on some background information on the Jorga Ranch specific plan. I know you haven't had enough of that lately. The purpose of this really is to set in motion the discussions that you will be having at your subsequent meeting to that, which will be on March 1st. That will be a special working session of the Planning Commission, starting that night, where we will be focused on discussing the amendments that we talked about last week. I think that was last week at council. It's hard to keep track of all the dates. And then following that, we will have the normal regular Planning Commission meeting on March 16th. So that's our standard monthly Planning Commission meeting. And we will have just one item on for that night. It'll be a discussion on a number of recommended development code amendments. And as Danielle suggested, we expect to have some new members of the commission likely seated in time for that March 1st special commission meeting. Happy to go over those dates or topics again if that would be of benefit.
Okay, so 223 is a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and Council?
Council.
And then what time is that at?
I believe 5 o'clock.
At 5
Is that
o'clock.
correct, Danielle? 5 o'clock?
And then on 3/1, we have the special meeting for Jorger Ranch.
Yes, we confirm that date with the commission. That'll be a discussion on the amendments that the council discussed last week.
Okay.
Just going back to the 23rd. So council's going to have a short regular agenda and then finish that, and then do a new agenda for the joint meeting so that you don't have to sit through their regular meeting.
Okay, got it. So we'll be just kind of on standby, 6, 7 o'clock, something like that.
I'm sorry, hi, this is Jen. Good, how are you all doing tonight? I would estimate close to 6-ish. We have a very brief council meeting, so 5:45, 6 o'clock is probably a good estimate. And we will try to have the new planning commissioner sworn in that night as well, so that they can have the benefit of the study session. I'm not sure if we'll have all the appointments made by that or not.
So it's my understanding we have one appointment made thus far with 2 pending, correct?
Correct.
Okay, got it. And then is this, that meeting, it's with the council, that's an open meeting?
Yes, it'll be a public meeting just like you have normally, but with the town council as well.
Got it.
But we're still assuming that these are all distance meetings, Zoom meetings type thing.
It will be, Zoom based. We might be able to explore bringing the chair and the council chambers so that the chair and the mayor are both running the meeting together, but I'm not sure if that's going to be able to happen or not.
I can bring a mask.
Okay. We'll work through the details on that.
Sit on one side of the dais, the other.
Yeah.
Bookends.
Yes.
Thanks, Jen. Any other questions on upcoming schedule? Okay, that's all I've got to report.
Okay, commissioner member reports. Susie, what have you been up to?
Sadly, I've gotten a full-time job, so I have been doing that. The benefit of that is I was allowed to get my first dose of the vaccine. So yay.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's about all right now.
Commissioner Miller?
None for me. No vaccine yet.
No reports either? Got it. Okay. Well, I sat through the latest GPAC meeting, which I found very interesting, and I look forward to hearing more about that and being more involved in that process as we go forward. There's definitely a lot of stuff that's very interesting and a lot of stuff that needs to be worked out still. So, okay, with the end of commissioner member reports, we're going to adjourn the meeting till the next meeting, Tuesday, February 23rd. Correct me if I'm wrong, because sorry, let me back up here because my notes say that we're adjourning the meeting to Tuesday, February 23rd. Which is obviously incorrect. So we are going to adjourn until March 1st, which will be the special meeting. Is that correct?
Your next meeting is technically February 23rd. That will be the joint meeting with council.
Right, thank you. I'm sorry. That's the joint one. Got it. Okay. And with that, we're adjourned until February 23rd at 5 p.m. Thanks, everybody.